and thank you all for joining us in celebrating the latest release of Danielle's book, which is like those Brisbane romantics. Well, I need to confess to you that when I was reading the book, throughout the novel and in the end, it was constantly reminding me of one session we had back then when I was still a student of Bachelor in Literature, English Literature. And there was one poetry session that we were reading one poem by Wilfred Owen. And because that poem, which I'm sure that many of you are kind of very used to hearing that about war, and the poem is very short, so I would like to recite it all here at the moment, if you don't mind. It starts, bend double like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coffin like hags, we curse through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and towards our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep, many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot, all went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropping softly behind. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could place behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the wide eyes writhen in his face, his hanging face like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood coming gargling from the corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cod of bile, incurable sores and innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et decorumus, perpetua mori. Perpetua mori, this is the very phrase that for centuries were kind of encouragement, a motive for many people to go on and fight for your homeland, a well-known phrase by the famous Roman poet Horace. But there is one single soul that can question this phrase, this probably lie. And this soul belongs to a soldier in the depth of a sanguine war. And this is this kind of question that comes, and it's deep by feelings, different kind of, the flux of different feelings. It's not just an ecstasy of going for war and then fighting for your country. In that very moment, a soldier is seeing the death of other pals. He's witnessing this flux of different feelings. And feeling is a core of the school of romanticism as we know it. And I love and I adore the way Dani works on the very title of this book, those Brisbane romantics. As we know, this book is not about love. This book is about the romantics in a very particular period of a country which has mistakenly been known as a safe country, as a country detached from everything which is going on in the northern hemisphere. So I would not like to discuss any further about the beauty and the depth of this novel, but I would like to ask you all to please welcome Dani so that we can hear from her about the novel. Russell.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Look, thank you everyone for coming. I'm very touched, really. And thank you, Russell. That was lovely. And thank you, Tina and Iman. Darling,
pleasure.
you are so good. You are so
You're
good.
always too humble.
Now, some writers can talk about their work. They're very good at it. Can't hear it, darling? Yeah, I'm not one of those. I'm no good at talking about my work, so I'm not going to talk a great deal at all, except to say that this one was very unusual for me because it took so long. I wrote the first draft in 1963. Who was even alive? Not my friend Matthew. Die almost. 1963. Yeah, and I did very well with it. In 1969 I got offered publication by Jacaranda Press. They were a really good press and they were here in Brisbane. If there was an if, and that was if I could cut the novel to 100,000 words. Now, for me to explain that to you, this is 95,000 words. The book I wrote was 270,000 words, and they would publish it if I could cut it to 100,000. And in those days I was young, I had absolutely no idea how to go about that. And all my money was gone that I'd saved from my first job. So I got a job in the State Library in the John Oxley. And I thought, well, I'll work for 2 years and then I'll worry about cutting this novel down to size. But you see, come in. That's the point at which I met somebody in the library, fell madly in love, and 3 months later I'm sitting on the edge of my bed and I'm pregnant. Okay, now you can fast forward from there to, really to 1993, I think, when my son was growing up and he'd moved away from home, and my daughter was still with me, but she was in high school. And I thought, right, now I knew how to cut the novel because I'd worked for a publishing company. I actually knew what to do. I thought, I'll do this now. And I did. I cut it in half. So it was like that plus another half. But it still wasn't there, you know. It was a bit like being a sculptor and standing in front of a very large block of marble. And you've hacked away and hacked away and hacked away. But when you step back, you know very well, you might have spent 2 years hacking, you haven't hacked far enough yet. That figure isn't there yet. So I put the thing away then, and I wrote a novel with a friend of mine because we thought it would be easy to do. It was a romance novel. I can tell you now, romance novels are not easy to write. I thought it would be very easy. No, they're hard. They're really hard. We won Romance Manuscript of the Year, so we both had some money for our time. But yeah, and then I wrote something else. And eventually I went back to the novel. And this continues, like every decade I go back to the novel and I hack some more out of it. While I was in Sydney with my daughter, there was a lady called Susan Geeson, who was another writer. And she said to me one day, I'd written to her and said, I really loved the story you had in a magazine. Are you down here? Do you want to have lunch with me? And when she knew that I was writing, she said, show me the book. And I trusted her. We're both Irish from back. She's ginger Irish and I'm black Irish. I had absolutely no idea she was the literary editor of the Sun Herald. I had no idea. I thought she was another writer. So she liked it, but that was when she said, no, you've got to keep chipping away, you have to keep hacking at this. So eventually, after I'd written a completely different novel and a book of short stories, I got an email from her, and it's now about, it would be about 2003, so, quite a bit of time's gone by. And she said, I see you've got a novel up and you've got this book of short stories. What happened to that Brisbane novel? And I said, yes, well, I've hacked and I've hacked and I've hacked and I'm down to 108, I think I was. And at 108,000, which is getting close, I got shortlisted for a national manuscript cob and an international one. But I was stuck. I said, look, I'm kind of stuck here. And she said, send it to me. Right, so I sent it to her and she hacked another 5,000 words out of it. So now we were down on 103,000. And she left me with it then, and I got it down to about 98,000. And I thought that I think the figure has come out of the marble. This is as far as I can go. And I decided I'll put it up on the web. Well, while I was putting it up on the web, and you should never, if there's anyone out there writing, don't do this. At the proof stage, when you should be looking for the commas and the full stops, I was still hacking out scenes. And I hacked out another 2,000 or 3,000 words. So now finally we're down on 95,000. And there we're staying. And I don't know what to say to you about it, really. I was so young when I wrote it. I didn't know that what I was doing was nailing down that very early period in Brisbane between 1961 62, before miniskirts come in. Miniskirts never got here till 1965. So this is that early part. And people have done the miniskirts, and really famous people like David Malouf have done the earlier, late 50s. But no one seems to have done that funny little turn of the decade where really Brisbane was still in the 50s. We really were. And I loved it, of course. I loved it. I loved being in Brisbane in 1961, 60. I loved all the buildings that are now no longer existing, that were all torn down and in the name of money, really, not even progress, like the Bellevue. So there's quite a few, buildings in that book that no longer exist, like the Bellevue. But mostly now, I'd like to say if anyone's got any questions, because I'm not a good public speaker, so I'm like, this is it for me. I can't go any further. Have you got any questions?
Another obvious one. Why was it so important to get it down to 95,000?
I would have been happy with 100,000.
Yeah, or whatever suits you.
Well, you see, when you've written such a very big book, like 275,000 or something, and you start cutting, there's always a point at which you think, I'm okay now, I don't need to do any more. And that was what was good for me when Susan said, hey, what's happened to that novel? And she looked at it and said, no, you've got to keep hacking. Well, she was the literary editor of the Sun Herald, so she knew what she was talking about. So, I hacked some more. But I think what happens, you've got to think of sculpting. You've got to think, you're tired and you think, yeah, I've got the figure. But you know very well if you can keep going, everything will come out and it will be so much more powerful. The characters will be more powerful. The story will be more powerful. Everything will be. If you've just got the guts to keep doing it. But you need to know what you're doing. I'm hopeless with these things. Thank you.
Because I can just imagining living it and thinking,
Oh,
oh, what
look.
happened there? Oh, you must have cut it out.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I worked with a writer who did that. I praised her work, and she went away and hacked the devil out of it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what have you done? You know, what has happened to this? You can't do that kind of chiselling unless you really know what you're doing, unless you're really clear about it. But God knows, I'd written a thing in 63. Of course I was clear about what I was doing. I knew that. I can recite this book if you'd like me to recite it. Do you have time? I could recite it.
Yes, let's go.
So Danielle, did you cut out characters or did you cut out experiences?
I only cut out experiences. There's one character I did change. One of the boys, I had 7 boys. I call them boys, they were young men. All of them had a role. Like one was a womanizer, one was an alcoholic, one was the main character for the girl. They all had a role, but there was one of them out of 7. He didn't have anything to do, really. And it was when I came back to the final hacking that I realised I did not have a single gay person in there. The reason being that when I wrote the book, I knew boys at university, I swear to God they were gay, but they couldn't say they were. They couldn't come out. And I thought, well, I've got this character who's really doing nothing, and he's one of those 7 boys. I'm going to make him gay. At this very late stage, 12 months before I published, I'm going to make this boy gay. But you won't know, he's never going to say he is, but the reader will know he's gay. Just from little things, like how meticulous he is, and, you know, how well dressed, and were they slobs, the whole lot of them were slobs. Yeah.
Yes.
You really just answered my question, actually, because you obviously wrote this book as a young woman.
I was very young.
And you're publishing it now, so you've had your whole life journey. So obviously, and you've just told us in one particular way how your perspective has changed.
Oh, it did. Yeah.
So are there any other examples?
It's
of that?
almost
Because that was
60
fascinating.
years. Almost 60 years.
So, but it's still the same book?
Yeah. But that character was doing nothing, which I finally saw, by the way, and I never saw it until I cut that I saw that he was doing nothing.
So, Danny, when the publishers expected you to cut it down to a certain number of words, is that because they felt the book would be too much to sell, to promote, or is it because they felt it needed to
It needed it. I'd just discovered dialogue at the age of 22. God help a reader, you know, reading a book where someone's very young and they've just discovered dialogue, because everything's in dialogue, you know. Instead of having some nice narrative about stuff, they think everything has to be shown to you through the dialogue, and it's as boring as anything to be shown stuff that you could have been told in 2 sentences. They use 3 pages to tell you the same darn thing, and no, it's boring. So it took me a long time, and working in publishing, to see, oh, well, it's nice that you can write dialogue, but it's got to be sparing. And it went like that. Oh, no, he was right. Oh, yeah, that was Brian Clouston.
Well, not just a commercial decision.
No, he was right. I mean, I'm a 95 now. Brian was right at 100. Yeah.
Yes.
Does anyone else want to know anything about the horrors of writing long
I'm
distance?
just curious, 63 and now 2000 and whatever I should call you.
Yes, I know, I don't anymore. It's almost 2023.
All right, yeah.
So it's
When you
almost
started
60
out,
years.
Did you have any idea that you were going to produce a book in 5 years or 60 years?
Oh, I think I'd have slashed my wrist if someone had told me 60 years. No, I was was so young, I didn't know any better. I was filled with what I thought was inspiration. And I wrote, and by the way, you wrote longhand in those days.
And you must have counted those words, each one every time, instead of the computer doing it for you. I can't imagine that.
There's no computers, and in those days nobody typed except typists. It was a profession. I mean, when I worked in the library, I wrote my letters back to people by hand, and you handed them to the typist pool, and the typist typed up your letter. Similarly, the typist typed up my manuscript. So, no, I had no idea. I was very ambitious. I really, really thought I was onto something here. And I was, like, I don't... It's difficult to say. There was no Vogel in those days. There was no award for an unpublished writer for a manuscript by one. So when I put the thing into this competition, I got beaten into second place by a guy who had 6 published novels to his credit, because there was no Vogel for unpublished writers at that point. So I had a feeling, I was obsessed. Basically, I was obsessed. Who can sit down and handwrite 270,000 words? Of course you're obsessed. You'd have to be. But I had this belief that kept that obsession going. And I almost made it, you know. But then it was far too long for what it was doing. Yeah.
Can you talk about the house on the cover? Because
Oh, Kelly. For 10 years I was too poor to get this designer. I wanted this man. He was over in America, but I had no money, and he was very expensive. And finally, you know, this year I thought, I've waited 60 years, I'm going to splash out, I'm going to have this man if it kills me. So I got in touch with him, or with his wife really. He does not answer emails, he's too busy being creative, you know. So I thought I was going to get something amazing, absolutely amazing, because he did do amazing things. But what he came back to me with was something akin to that, only they weren't kookaburras, they were bee-eaters. If you know what a bee-eater is, I didn't know, I had to look it up. And that was kind of like round about there. Then there was all this blue sky up there, and there was all this lovely happy writing up the top with the title. And I was kind of like gobsmacked when I got this first draft from him. I knew it wouldn't, I can't use it, it's too happy, it doesn't tell us anything about the novel. And he had obviously invested a lot of time in that first version.
Do you think you'd read the book?
No. No. Back in the good old days, he used to read the book. In the good old days when I thought, and he still is good, yes, he was reading the books. Oh yeah, they said, send me the book, send me the book. Oh yes, send us the book. I sent the book, I sent everything. No. Because the second time, I was desperate then. I didn't know what to do, and he seemed to be at a loss. And that's when I suggested the house. And there's another photograph on Wikipedia where the house is all falling down. There's lots of bushes and trees.
Is it the man's house?
Yes.
Yes. So it's being renovated at the moment.
Yes, it is. But there was a lovely photo by a guy called Tony Moore, of all people. I know another Tony Moore. And it was all overgrown, and it was shot from below. It was beautiful. So I sent the designer to the Wikipedia page. So when version 2 came back to me, the house was the other house, which is standing on this empty driveway. There's not a tree in sight. It's just been built. And I said to him, but the opening sentence says the house crouched down and hid among the trees, right? Oh, he said, okay, I'll put some trees in for you. And we went through another, this is version 5. But obviously he loved that original cover because he snuck in the birds on the branch at the bay. He snuck it in there. So there you go. But it was a strange experience because I'd spent 10 years lusting after this man's work, and all I had was trouble. It was scary. Yeah, it was frightening. Yeah.
Have you got any other books in the pipeline at the moment?
Well, the thing is, I've got one book up there, very strange, unusual, different book, talking animals, Australian animals, that nobody ever understood, and they thought I was crazy because I put that one up first. No one understood that book. Kelly, did you read it? Did you like it, or did you think it was twisted too?
She keeps talking about that, so definitely she liked it.
That, in my mind, is the most beautiful, feel-good book. When you finish, you feel... I could talk about that book. That's a beautiful book. All I see here is a whole lot of hard work. But that's a book that just... people talk about stuff coming to them, and it's mostly a dream. It doesn't do that. But that did. And I didn't know what it was going to do from day to day. It was so exciting. It was just so amazing to get up in the morning and not know what these characters were going to do. I had no plan. And as for the... Yeah, it's up there on the web. Yeah. I love that book. It's a beautiful book, I think. But strange because it's like a children's book for adults, and there is such a genre now, children's books for adults.
Which probably I'm obsessed with.
Are you?
Definitely.
So is your next book going to be more like that?
Well, because I had such